my technology that I deal with in my work is peaked in 1705. My name is Geoffrey Seitz. I'm originally from Lemay, Missouri, and I'm here in Carondelet, Missouri, or St. Louis City, really, but the Carondelet part of St. Louis City, with my violin shop that's been here for 35 years, called Geoffrey Seitz Violin Maker. And we make violins, we restore violins, we fix people's violins, we sell old violins, we have some rare things, collectible, rare instruments. We do violas, cellos, basses, and then some oddball things as well. So we do a lot of different types of instruments here. And then we make them from scratch too. We make violins, violas, and cellos. And when we get a chance to do that. We were on the Northwest, and we went into Spokane and went to this music store, and they referred me to this violin maker to get the violin repaired. And it was really interesting. I thought, this is really something, I might, think about this here. And eventually I just moved up there and talked him into taking me on as an apprentice. And he rejected me at first, because people see this life and they go, oh my God, I want this. But it's a lot of hard work. So I make instruments from the get-go. I've even cut a tree down and used the wood from a standing dead tree. Generally, we buy wood from suppliers that supply instrument wood, but it has to be dried for at least 7 years minimum.
Sitka?
Yeah, this is Sitka. Yeah, I use Sitka, but I use other ones too. We have so much wood that we bought years and years ago. It's all of our wood is plenty dry and everything. And we just start from scratch, start from boards and start gluing them together and start carving out everything and start making the shapes and making the pieces. Violins have about 77 pieces, and they all have to be made to fit really nice. We use the old glue that they used to use, the horsehide glue. We use mostly scrapers. We don't use a lot of sandpaper. We use really sharp chisels and sharp knives and scrapers. Basically, that's how it's done. It's the way it was done a long time ago. One of my lines is, my technology that I deal with in my work is peaked in 1705. So it's a very unusual thing, violins and violas, cellos. You can take an instrument from 1705 and you can actually play it, and it works really great. We use a lot of techniques that they used back in the old days, which is the glue, the horsehide glue, fitting things by hand, doing all this kind of stuff like that, and you get the really good results if you do that. Now, of course, there's commercial things, and those are made on machines sometimes, or made by people, knocking them out real fast. Those are for students. That's a whole different type of thing. So the stuff we make is more kind of artistic, more, focused, and a little different. All in all. If you're a guy that just builds instruments and you're really efficient and you're organized and all that stuff, you can probably get one done in about 200 hours, somewhere around there. For me, it's more like 300 to 400 because I'm not real efficient, and I'm not, I also do some things. There's some parts on the violin, like a part called the purfling, which a lot of people buy commercially. It's 3 little strips of wood glued together, but I make those from scratch, so that takes more time too. I make the varnish from scratch. I do all that kind of stuff like that. So all of those things add to the time as well. So sound is very subjective. Okay, so like a really fine violin, you can hear it, and some people will really love the sound, and some people will not like the sound. And even as good of a maker as you are, each violin is going to be a little bit different because it's handmade, and the handmadeness of it makes it very unique. Each one unique.
It's something that that sounds pleasant while it's this close to your face is important. And also something that responds when I'm trying to really dig in, but also has a nice mellow for all the sad songs. Yeah, I mean, any nice instrument has a full range of response from quiet to loud, which, especially playing in a small group, is really important.
So, for example, let's talk about Stradivari, the great violin maker from northern Italy that worked in the late 1600s, early 1700s. He even made a couple of violins that didn't sound all that great. I've actually heard one. I've actually had it in my hands. And you know, he's just a person. In general, though, the stuff he made was really incredible and outstanding and groundbreaking. So that's a whole nother story. There's this rumor that I had a Stradivarius. Was not a Stradivarius, but it's a Guadagnini, and the Guadagnini is a very wonderful, desirable instrument. In fact, they think maybe one of the Guadagnini family members worked in Stradivari's shop, so there's a direct lineage for that. And what happened was, in the flood of '93, it was in a bank vault in Lime, and it was in what we did not know was in a floodplain, and they didn't let us get our things out. I actually went to them daily to try to get it out, and they didn't let us get it out, and it got flooded. So we still have it, and could be pieced back together. Haven't done anything about it yet, but that's that story. Yeah, so not a real Stradivari, but pretty nice instrument. But you know, people are just humans that are makers, and they. You know, they each one's going to be a little bit different. In fact, to be consistent is a hard thing to do, and that sometimes is part of your training is to try to be consistent. You know, in some ways. So here's a piece here. This is going to be the back of a violin. It's just roughed out, and we right now this is in the process of carving the arch. So some people think that the arch on these instruments, this is the shape of the thing, is pressed in, but it's not. It's actually carved out. And so at this stage of the game, I'm using a little finger plane, and I'm kind of, you know, smoothing it out right now with the finger plane, and that's what I'm doing with this right here. Before that, I used a chisel to get it roughed out, but the problem is a chisel leaves what they call flutes in it. The chisel leaves marks in it, so then you smooth it out with the finger plane, which is very important, and then the scraper comes in and you scrape it. Okay, so that's the back and the top and everything is that. The sides are actually a very thin piece of wood. This is about a millimeter, 1.2 thick. That's thinned out, and then this is bent on a hot iron. So it's dipped in water and then it's bent on a hot iron. So, and this is in the process of. This is a frame right here, and we call that the mold, and we're building it on that mold. That mold will come out. In fact, I'll show you in just a second here how that works. Okay, so here's a violin. There's one that's this is just one of my examples, but this is built on this mold here, and then after this is all kind of finished, you can see the mold comes out, and then you have the hollow violin here, and you start to do the finish work on the inside of this. You can reuse this and build more instruments on this. And so, and this kind of determines your shape and determines everything. So that's what that is. That's how that works. And the neck's kind of the same thing. You know, the neck is kind of the same way. I like to say, you know, the violin making, a lot of it is you make a pattern, you trace it out, and then you saw out your pattern, you know, so then this is how that was done. And then that's kind of the start of the neck. And what we'll do is we'll cut it to the right dimensions so that it's thinner, and then we'll carve that scroll on the top there. And that's the traditional way to make the neck. So the neck, the back, and the sides are maple, and the top is spruce. And those are the general like woods that are traditionally used. You can make them out of anything you want, but those seem to be the best woods because spruce is light and it's strong. So it transfers the vibrations real quickly, right away from the strings to the bridge. The bridge holds the strings up directly down to the top. So it's light and flexible. And then there's also some reflection going on the inside of the sound waves and everything. And maple is very consistent. It's very smooth, and it helps for that as well. It's somewhat flexible too. So that makes that good. I've heard them made out of different instruments, different types of, different woods. They sound good, they sound okay, but they lack some things that a really fine violin has. The funny thing about a violin is it sounds like a human voice. That's the thing that makes it so compelling. And it has things about it that you can only describe as like meat on the bone and gristle, and that sound, it kind of elicits the human kind of aspects. And a lot of that stuff is missing if you don't use the correct woods. So every once in a while you get a fluke though. I ran into a violin one time made out of pear wood by a maker in Washington State, and it was fabulous. So, it can happen, but it's not as common. Let's put it that way. Okay, so let's talk about the people. One of the most asked questions is, what's the difference between a violin and a fiddle? Okay, so the history of the word fiddle actually predates the violin, and I believe it's fiedel, F-I-E-D-L, and that word means an object, a small object with a string on it. That's what that means. So when you hear, Nero fiddled while Rome burned, there were no violins at that. That was like what, 8 A.D. or something or whatever. That just meant he was plucking on or scratching on something with a string, a small thing with a string on it. So let's fast forward to the 1500s. In the 1500s, the things that were predated violins were called viols, and viols tended to be pretty big. And then somewhere along the line, some people say it was Andrea Amati was one of them, but there were some guys in the Tyrol area of Germany as well. They decided to make this little smaller instrument, the violin, and the strings were pitched a little higher, and it turned out that it was very popular. It had a sound that was just really wonderful, and imitated a soprano voice, and it was became immediately popular. So that was also called a fiddle because it was small. It was small with strings on it as compared to the other thing. So then you fast forward up into the 20th century, and you have what's called fiddle music, and fiddle music tends to suggest country music. So a lot of people think that the fiddle's a different instrument used for country music or something like that, but in fact, it's not. And generally what happened was a lot of people that play folk fiddle or play fiddle tunes or like bluegrass kind of stuff. In the old days, a lot of those people, it was rural, mostly poor. And so they would buy their violins from Sears for a couple bucks, and they would play kind of a cheaper violin. But believe me, if somewhere along the line you came into some money, they would buy a better violin. And I know at this point in time in the world, all the cats from Nashville that I know that are top-notch fiddle players play very expensive violin. The process of someone ordering a violin from me, I actually have that on the table right now. I actually have a couple of orders up, but one in particular, a violin player wants me to custom make them an instrument. Because I run a shop and because I do so many other things and I wear a lot of hats and stuff, it's going to take a little bit longer, and I'm trying to make it clear to them it could be a year, could be 2 years, could be that. They're okay with that. So because they just want my stuff. So it could be sooner. I hope it is, but you never know. And then from there, we talk about kind of what they want, but the other thing is I make what I make. And so if someone comes in and says, well, I want, this to look like this or that, something, that's fine. But I want it to sound like this. That's not fine, because that's kind of that's kind of the backwards way to make it. It's actually, if you make up a really nice violin, it'll sound nice, but you can't just kind of backwards engineer it from sound. For me, I don't build them like that. There might be someone on earth that can do that. If somebody says, I want a really bright violin, then they would know how to do that. But, I don't do it. I make what I make. You know, the last few that I've made, people have been over the moon. So, you know, that's all you need. That's good enough for me. I've probably made 40 to 50 instruments total. Because I've made some violas, some cellos. I've actually made a few guitars, made some other things. So probably around that. Yeah, 40 to 50, which is not much for a lifetime, but you know, like I said, I don't do it all the time.
Give us a fiddle tune.